Hi everyone, it's Karen here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have an unusual tutorial because things happen by accident. I have this video on what happens when things don't go how you expected, but they turn out even better than you thought. And this is what happened with this video. I originally wanted to create something with napkins. I found this amazing napkin at my mom's house. She bought it at the dollar store. And it had some flower print, but it was very delicate and white. And I wanted to kind of stick it to a page, to my art journal page, and then color it in after sealing it with gel. And I ended up trying to glue it to the background, and it basically did not work the way I wanted to. It ripped everywhere. It was very fragile, and it turned out like a big hot mess that you see in my background. I am working in the craft paper inside the media journal from Dina Wakley. And my whole idea to do something with napkins, when I record my videos, I actually save them according to what I'm going to name them later on. And since I thought this was a napkin project, I named it Napkin 1, Napkin 2, and so forth in all the videos that I was recording as I was creating. But then I realized that this was not going to turn out the way I wanted to, but I was so happy I kept on going because I really wanted to just turn the page and give up on this one. But eventually I went in a completely different direction. The project should have not been called Napkin, and I really recommend you sticking it out till the end to really see what the outcome came out and how I came out with that outcome, because the way I was going, I was really going to give up on this project, but I am so happy that I didn't. So what I did is I took some white gesso because I really love the texture that the napkin created. So I used some gel to try to glue that napkin, and when it didn't work, I decided that I'm going to let it dry and see what happens with it. So I actually deleted the first recording where I'm gluing this napkin. It's really ripped everywhere, so there was no point, and it created a really cool texture. So I thought, what if I add gesso on top? You know, gesso is my favorite friend. White gesso could cover everything, could cover the texture and just give texture to the background. Then I can add color. That was my idea. I figured if I have a really good textured background, that would work. So I just started adding gesso and more gesso in all the different areas, just basically covering the rough areas. And then while it was still wet, I thought to myself, you know what? I have another one of these napkins. Let me try and glue some of the pieces on top of the gesso. Since the background of the gesso was white, it's much easier. And as you might have seen in my last video, I actually glued some tissue paper with gesso. It glues really nicely. It's not used instead of glue, so don't get that mixed up, but I thought it was really cool. So I just decided to rip some of the pieces from the napkin and basically glue it on top. Once all the napkins were stuck to the background, I heat set the gesso really, really well. That way I could add color on top. I took one of my watercolor palettes. This is one of my favorite ones. I don't remember the name, but I will list it below. Gansai, I think it's called. But I will list everything below in the description area. It's just much easier for me to figure out the products later on. But you could use any watercolors. I like these because they're very intense. The intensity of the color is very high because they're highly pigmented. But truly, it doesn't really matter which watercolor you use. You can use like powdered watercolor. You can use paints. Basically, anything goes. I mean, at this point, I just wanted to kind of color the texture, and I was combining different colors. I went in with the warm colors like reds, oranges, and yellows, and I was just going with the flow and just adding this. But as I was painting, I realized how ugly everything was turning out, and I was very disappointed in it. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept on going with the brush, and I figured that something will come out of it. If not, I'll just turn the page. The nice thing about art journals is that you can turn the page if you don't like something, and it doesn't really matter. It just sits there, or you can even rip the page. But I had something nice in the back, so I didn't want to actually rip it. So I just kept on going with the colors until I decided to actually cover everything. So instead of just going with the edges, I ended up covering the whole page. I also added a little bit of black in certain areas, and that helped kind of darken the feel a little bit. But I only added it at the edges because I didn't want to add too much black because that can really overpower everything. Once I saw that this was not going in many different ways, I decided that I'm going to basically cover the whole page with the color. So I ended up coloring everything with my paintbrush in different tones. So I mixed the oranges, the pinks, the yellows, and the reds, and just went ahead. And as I was mixing it out, I would water down some areas and just basically painted everything. At this point, I was just frustrated with this because I really didn't know where to go with it. So I just went ahead and painted the other side. I literally just used paint to paint the whole area just because I just didn't know what to do. It was just so ugly. And I love the pattern in the background with the napkins, but the paint looked weird and I just didn't know what to do with it. So I just stuck with it and painted, and that was it for now. Since there was a lot of water in the background, I knew that I would have to dry this really well. So because I was very impatient and I wanted to just see what I could do, I started drying it with my heat gun. And as I was drying, I was thinking, what could I do with this? It just looks horrible. I thought maybe to draw some trees on it, which I've always done. I've done in the past, or some animals or something like that. And as I was looking at this, I actually saw women shapes inside my artwork. It was really weird. It's almost as if they had appeared there out of nowhere. And as I was drawing, I could literally see 6 different shapes of women. And I had to dry this really well before I actually just outlined them, because I really wanted to outline them quickly. But I couldn't outline them until I knew everything was dry, because then the gesso gets everywhere and it doesn't make any markings. Finally, it was dry. I impatiently waited for that. And then I took my Stabilo pencil and I started outlining the shapes that I had seen. I saw different bodies, and different heads, and each body had a different shape, but all of them looked like really beautiful women. What I loved about these women is that they each looked different. They were different heights, different body sizes. Some were, curvy, and some were very slim. Some had different colored skin, and it all manifested in this really cool background, which I just kind of saw. I even saw a pregnant woman in the side, so I ended up outlining that one as well. One was wearing a gown, while one was just dressed casually, and you can kind of see the curves around them and the heads, and I thought it was really, really cool. So I just basically went around with my Stabilo pencil and just outlined them roughly. Then I took back the white gesso and, using a paintbrush, basically masked around the outlines of the women. I just wanted to make sure that they would kind of stand out. So what was cool about it is that the concentration of the color was kind of around their dresses. So it looked like their dresses were different colors and they were very highly textured, where the heads turned out to be like more muted and had, like, one had a black head and one had a brown head, one has like a pink head, white head, yellow head. It was really interesting how they all turned out differently. It was really as if the page came out of nowhere and it just sprung out of thin air. I don't even know how it happened, to tell you the truth. I really hope that I can recreate this technique again. I'm not sure if I'll be able to. So I just continued basically covering everything. And one of the things I really liked is that all the women were able to kind of touch each other. They were all touching each other. They were basically like a band together, like a tribe. And even though they were all different, they were coming together as one. So I really think it's a really powerful message that was inside my page. And I wonder if there's a lot of hidden messages sometimes in our pages, in our artwork, that we just don't see because we're so concentrated on we're concentrating on the final product that we don't really see the journey inside of it. This was a really big eye opener for me because I really went from one idea to another without even realizing what I was doing. Like, it literally happened without me expecting it, and it turned out even better than I have ever thought. And it's basically now one of my favorite art journaling pages I have ever done. I really am like in awe on what happened. I mean, obviously it's some intuitive thing that happened, and I encourage you to basically do this. Just find shapes inside your art journal. I mean, I'm definitely going to try this again and see how it goes. So just really excited about this page. I heat set the gesso really well because I wanted to use a water brush to dilute the Stabilo pencil. If you know the Stabilo, if you're familiar with it, it's a pencil, but it's water soluble, and it goes on any type of surface, which is amazing, even like plastic and metal and wood and any mixed media. So you can really outline things well, and all you have to do is just use a little bit of water and just dilute it a little bit. So what I was doing is I was outlining the shapes, and I was adding a little bit of shadows there as well. Another thing I wanted to point out, I don't know if you noticed this, is that in the women themselves, besides being curvy, they're really not perfect. The imperfection of there is what I love. Like even one of them, you can see their breasts. Like some of them have like almost lopsided breasts. I just think that's really how we are as women. We are not perfect, not our body shapes, not the way we look, but we are perfect in our imperfections, and that's what's nice to see about it. So maybe nothing is perfect because that's how we were born, but we are perfect the way we are because it is who we are. So just really a point to it's really something that I would like to take out of this and point out, and I really think it's important as a message for everyone. I continued outlining the different women, and then what I did is I added a few scribbles and lines at the bottom of the page. Some of them were kind of floating in the air, so it kind of gave it like a base or kind of like a ground to stand on, because I didn't want them to be floating. I thought they shouldn't be in the air. They should be kind of like standing on firm ground, which is what I envisioned. So I just made a few markings with my Stabilo pencil, and then I just diluted it and kind of blended them just to make it very rough looking. Then to add even more texture, I took a black archival ink and I used some stamps to create some texture. But I made sure that I stay at the bottom of the page. I really wanted the white space in the top to stay there. So all I did is just basically use different stamps. The first one is a script stamp, and just stamp around the women and at the bottom of the page to give it a little bit more texture. I went over their dresses and in between things, but I stayed away from their shoulders down, basically. So depending on where they were standing, I just wanted to have that white space at the top. I used several different stamps, and the stamp itself is not what matters. What's important for the composition is that you use stamps that have different shapes. So for example, the first one was a script stamp, but this one that I'm using now has circular stamped images. So it gives another type of texture. And it doesn't, I might not be able to list this one below. I'll see if I can find it, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you use different textures for the background. The last stamp, it looks like a grid. And also, it just adds a little bit more texture to this, but you can barely see this one. It's kind of hidden in the texture of all the dresses. Finally, I took a word for each one of the women and I glued it on their bodies. Each one was something that a woman could be, like a dreamer, hopeful, passionate, kind, soulful. I just thought it would be really nice to have these messages on each one of them, and I thought that looked really good. So I just glued it with a little bit of soft matte gel on each of their bodies. I dried the gel with my heat tool so I could use my Stabilo pencil and just outline the words in black. That way they would really stand out. And I used the pencil to journal around the bodies of the women. So in the white space that was left over, I ended up turning the book and just journaling about how I felt about this project that I had done. I wanted to journal about how unique we each are, and there's only one of us each, and that it's important to lift each other up instead of putting others down. But I also wanted to journal about how you never know what you're going to get. You're going to try something and it's not what you expected, but it becomes even better. And that's what happened with this journal. And I'm just so grateful that it did because, as I said, it's one of my favorite art journaling pages of all time. You can really see how bright the colors are in these pictures. I tried to take some really good pictures of the art journal so you don't see the muted colors that you see in the video. Some art, it's nicer to see the bright colors that the watercolors created. So I just wanted to really show you some close-ups of the texture and of each woman individually. So thank you so much for joining me today on my journey. I hope you enjoyed and have an amazing day. Bye.